Hi there, smart drivers. Talking to you about left-hand turns, the most challenging maneuver for new drivers. And as a new driver with a license, this is the place that you're most likely to get into trouble. So we're going to give you tips, strategies, and skills to make left turns safely. We're talking about left-hand turns, keeping yourself safe, advanced left turns. Another piece that can be a bit tricky at multi-lane intersections. You can see this traffic light here has an advanced left turning arrow. There may be a traffic light that is just for left turning traffic, and there will be a sign underneath it. A couple of resources to have a look at. Left-hand turns gone wrong, and you can see this car out here wandering around in the intersection trying to make a left-hand turn. Caught that on dash cam. You can find these videos down in the description there, and the podcast, Pass Your Driver's Test First Time, have a listen to that as well if you're going for your driver's license. They are dangerous because you're in the crosshairs of the oncoming traffic. It's a T-bone crash that often results, and oftentimes they are fatal, and it is usually a loved one sitting in the passenger seat that dies as a result of the crash. So you want to be careful making these. There's no protection in the vehicle, very little protection. There are side impact airbags, reinforced door panels and whatnot, but for the most part, there just isn't the distance between vehicle occupants and the outside of the vehicle that are going to keep you safe when you're making left-hand turns. And as well, judging gap, it takes some experience with driving to correctly identify a safe gap, and you need to be able to do this successfully when you're learning how to drive. Start learning how to make left-hand turns in residential areas, quiet areas, low density traffic, maybe in an industrial area or a suburb and whatnot. Get comfortable with the steering wheel. If you're asking the instructor how much you need to turn the steering wheel when you're making left-hand turns, you shouldn't be out on the roadway making left-hand turns. You should be in the parking lot working with pylons. Reversing, you should be working with pylons, going around in forward figure eights and going in circles and those types of things, and figuring out the primary controls before you get out on the roadway, because you don't want to be trying to go around on a right-hand turn going, well, how much do I need to turn the steering wheel? All of that, by the time you get out on the roadway, should be instinctual. You should know how to do it because you've already practiced in a parking lot. It doesn't take that long. It takes about an hour, a couple hours, and the slow speed maneuvers will improve your overall driving. I was watching a driving school car here yesterday, and they were getting the student to back up along the curb, and I thought, oh, that's great. But you're only getting them to back up 20 feet. They're not learning anything from that. I mean, there's all kinds of alleyways in the neighborhood where I live that are a couple of blocks. You can get them to back up in a straight line for a couple of blocks, and all that really, really helps out the student. And Corey will put up the video for you about Ariel, and that's what I did with Ariel. I took her both lessons, back alleyways, and getting her to back up for long distances in back alleyways. That will improve a driver's mastery of the primary controls and where the vehicle is in space and place. In other words, where's your vehicle in relation to other traffic, and how much do you need to turn it? When do you need to start turning it? Because you can say all you want, oh, just look in the direction you want to go, the vehicle will go where you want it to go. No, you have to get new drivers to practice. And the other piece about this, I got a Google synopsis every day set up, a Google alert rather, and it talks about driver training, and it was, Robert J. was his name. He wrote a blog post about helping his 15-year-old daughter study for driving, and he was like, oh, I need to go on and do some online resources, and was taking the online tests and whatnot. He didn't fail the online test once, not twice, not 3 times. He failed the online test 5 times, and he'd been driving for 30 years and realized, wait a minute, there's a lot more to this than I thought, right? So know that when you're not only learning how to drive, but also if you're helping somebody else to learn how to drive and pass his or her driver's test. Find your landmarks. Where do you need to start turning? Generally, the landmark for turning on a left-hand turn is you, the driver, want to be in line with the first lane of traffic. So if you're in a residential area, in a suburb, and it's a 2-lane road, the curb on this side is when you want to start turning the steering wheel to get to make that left-hand turn. All right, every time you move sideways, when in doubt, turning the steering wheel. If you're changing directions of the vehicle, lane changes, turns, shoulder check, shoulder check, shoulder check. As Smart Driver said a couple of weeks ago, ABS, always be scanning. And this is why I'm the shoulder check guy. I'm the guy that if you tell me you can adjust your mirror so you don't have to shoulder check, I'm going to tell you it's butkus. I'm going to tell you you're full of poopy-doo, okay? Because you need to shoulder check. Not shoulder checking is to driving what not checking to see if a gun is loaded is to weapon safety. Why on any planet would you move a 3,000-pound vehicle at speed and not check to see if there's somebody in your blind areas? And I know you have blind spot detectors and you got convex mirrors and all those things, but they're just a backup to good driving. As well, learning how to shoulder check and creating the habit of shoulder checking gets you to move your head and scan effectively, because observation is one of the keystones of safe driving, okay? Shoulder checking, shoulder checking, shoulder checking, even on left-hand turns. You want to create that habit of shoulder checking. Arch, yes. Horse pucky. It's horse pucky that you can adjust your mirror so you can drive safely and not move your head and not shoulder check. You have to shoulder check and you have to move your head to drive safely. And it doesn't matter what vehicle you're in, whether it's a tractor trailer, whether it's a bicycle, whether it's a car, a motorcycle, you must shoulder check to be a safer, smarter driver. Waiting at the edge of the intersection. We've talked about this, about waiting at the edge of the intersection as opposed to being in the center of the intersection. It is the best defensive posturing because you're committed to the intersection, but you're not in the intersection. If something happens, you're not in it. And if something weird at the intersection happens, you're not in it. So it is the best defensive posturing, waiting at the edge of the intersection. And your landmark for that is your front steer tires on the front crosswalk line. Now, most of the time, the front crosswalk line is at the edge of the intersection, but I have noticed lately, while I'm kind of taking note of this while I'm driving around, that sometimes the edge of the intersection can be out a little bit farther too, right? So you can move up, okay? You're committed to the intersection, but you're not in the intersection. Actually, paying attention to traffic and watching other people, and I should come down to Vancouver or one of the other large metropolitan areas and park myself out at an intersection and watch people. But for the most part, I would say that probably 60% of drivers do a good job of this. They do not move into the intersection. And it becomes even more important as you get into larger vehicles, because you need to get your speed built up driving straight into the intersection, because the more speed you have when you make the turn, the less time you are in the crosshairs of oncoming traffic, and you want to minimize that so that you can keep yourself safe when you're driving. All right, going on yellow, going on red, where to wait. Again, waiting at the edge of the intersection. We talked about this. Some smart drivers have come back to me over the years and said to me that, they failed going on the yellow, but I said they could go on the yellow. Yes, if you hesitate, the light turns yellow and you hesitate, the light goes red, you're in the intersection, you're probably not going to pass your driver's test. This is why it's challenging at complex intersections when you're making left-hand turns, because you're trying to keep track of three things. And if it's busy, those three things can get overwhelming. You're keeping track of the traffic light, you're keeping track of oncoming traffic, determining and looking for your gap, and you're looking at the pedestrians on the cross street to make sure that you're not going to run into them or get held up by pedestrians on the cross street. And then finally, at a complex intersection, you also have that right turning lane over there on the far side, and you got to make sure that the person making the right turn, you're not going to turn in beside them, right? You either want to turn in front of them or turn in behind them to keep yourself safe making that left-hand turn. Going on red. Yes, there are times, but as I said, I can count on one hand the number of times that you have to turn on the red light, because it is so busy, so congested, so backed up that you do in fact have to make the turn on the red light. But it is rare that you're in that kind of congestion, unless you're working in some place where every day it happens, you're driving home at the peak of congestion and those types of things. Maybe, but again, not really. And the last time that I really had to push through traffic was when I was in Barcelona in Spain in the roundabouts, right? You got to hold your line, go slow, and push through traffic. But there is a way to do that and keep yourself safe when you're driving. Looking and seeing. And again, this image is not very good. I need to redo the images on this presentation. I do apologize for that. But you got to watch that right turning lane over on that far side. And this is the other piece, and this is the critical piece about looking and seeing. The other reason that you stay back at the edge of the intersection when you're waiting for your gap is you have a better line of sight of the intersection. The traffic light, the oncoming traffic, is all out through the front window, and as well, the pedestrians and the right slip lane on the far side of the intersection are also out through the front of the windshield. If you move into the intersection, now you've put those pedestrians and you've into your blind area here on this side, and you have to physically turn your head. Staying back at the edge of the intersection, you have a better view of the intersection. You can map the intersection and track road users, and you can follow those road users that could potentially cross your path of travel on making the left-hand turn. So stay back at the edge of the intersection so that you can observe, map the intersection, and track the road users at that intersection and determine your gap to make your left-hand turn safely. Good luck on your driver's test, and remember, pick the best answer, not necessarily the right answer. There are two schools of thinking on left-hand turns. One is to move deep into the intersection and sit in the intersection. I do not subscribe to that school of thinking on left-hand turns. The best defensive posturing for left-hand turns is to wait at the edge of the intersection and move into the intersection when the gap on the other side of the intersection presents itself. And the reason for that is because if something happens while you're in the intersection, you're not going to be in it. So it's the best defensive posturing that you can put in place to keep yourself safe. Elevator, I'll be going on a solo trip by myself on the highway. Do you have any good tips for making left-hand turns off a highway? Yes, lots of space in front. Also, elevator fan, again, staying back from the turn. And on highways, you don't want to stay at the edge of the intersection. You want to actually stay back 1 or 2 car lengths. That way, when you see your gap down the highway, you can actually start to move forward, and then the car goes by, and then you make your turn into the gap, and you have more speed as you're making your gap. So the reason that you're staying back is so that you can get more speed when you make your turn, and that way you're reducing the amount of time you're in the crosshairs of the oncoming traffic, because T-bone crashes are generally a result of left-hand turns, okay, gone wrong. T-bone crashes are oftentimes fatal, and the unfortunate part about it is that usually it's a loved one who's in the passenger seat and they get T-boned, and they're going to die as a result of that collision, because I've talked about this previously, there isn't anything in the vehicle that is going to protect you. There just simply isn't enough distance. With head-on crashes, we've reduced the number of fatalities owing to front head-on crashes due to the fact that we have a crumple zone in the front of the car. This is why when you get into a front-end crash, it looks like the car is completely totaled. It's designed to do that to protect vehicle occupants in the vehicle, because the energy has to go somewhere. As speed increases, the amount of energy in the vehicle increases exponentially. This is why there are twice the number of fatal crashes on highways as there are in the cities. We have twice as many crashes in the cities, but half the number of fatal crashes. So this is what's going on with the amount of energy in the vehicle. And this is why, we've reduced the number of fatalities for the front end crashes. But T-bone crashes, there isn't enough distance between vehicle occupants and the outside of the vehicle. This is like literally 12 inches, 20 centimeters between the vehicle occupants and the outside of the vehicle. And there just isn't enough distance to dissipate that energy from the collision. Consequently, most left-hand turns, most T-bone crashes are going to be fatal. Even with side impact airbags, reinforced door panels, those types of things, it all goes a long way to helping and saving vehicle occupants, but it's the best, Mr. Miyagi, the Karate Kid, best block, not be there, right? Best way to survive a crash is to not be in one, and that's what we're talking about tonight. Paul, those international left-turning drivers can be worst right in front of straight vehicles going through the lights. Yes, and the other piece about that, exactly what Paul is talking about, people are going to do that. They're going to push through on the yellow and even on the red, right? And there are times that you have to do that, but the times are rare. And I get this argument when I talk about this, that you have to move into the intersection so you can move as many vehicles through the intersection as possible. It's rare. Like, unless you live in a large metropolitan city and you're at major intersections, then yes, sometimes you have to push through the intersection, but they're rare. I can count on one hand the number of times that I've had to push through on a left-hand turn at an intersection. It's the same thing as driving in heavy, deep snow. I can count on one hand the number of times that I've driven in heavy, deep blowing snow on the roadway and probably pushing through because of heavy congestion in a city on a left-hand turn. It's the same thing. It rarely happens. So most of the time, 98.5% of the time when you're driving, it's best to stay back at the edge of the intersection before making your left-hand turns. Now, for those of you taking driver's tests, I know that some states are different. New York State, for example, they want you to move into the intersection when making left-hand turns. That's their school of thinking. That's what they want you to do on the driver's test. You're only going to get docked a couple of points, demerit points. So for those of you who don't know, there's two ways to fail a driver's test. One is you're assigned demerits for mistakes, and most tests you're allowed 35 demerit points. If you get more than 35 demerit points, you're not successful on your test. Minor errors get 5 to 10 points. Major errors get 10 to 20 points. If you get a couple of major errors, you're not going to be successful on your driver's test. You get, half a dozen, 6 minor errors at 5 points, you're going to be close. And it's up to the discretion of the examiner whether you pass or fail. And then there are outright fails, automatic fails, and Corey will put up the two videos, the one on the most common mistakes on a driver's test, and the other one is outright automatic fails on a driver's test. Have a look at those videos. Left-hand turns, if you misjudge the gap and another driver has to take evasive action to avoid you, that's an automatic fail on a driver's test because it's a dangerous action. The other piece about it, especially for new drivers, is they're still trying to figure out the gap. What is a sufficient gap to make a left-hand turn safely? And oftentimes, because of social pressure when driving, because driving is a social activity, social driving, therefore there are going to be other drivers that are sitting behind you, and if you don't go on a gap that they think is sufficient, they're going to honk at you, they're going to give you the fingers, they're going to flash your headlights, they're going to tell you you're number one, and there's a lot of pressure for you to hurry up and go on a left-hand turn. And I tell you again and again and again, as a newly licensed driver, if you are not comfortable with going, don't go. Okay, if you don't feel the gap is sufficient, do not go. Do not get pressured by other drivers to go on a left-hand turn, because if a crash results, it's going to be you that pays for that, not the person behind you that was honking at you to tell you to go, to hurry up and go. And I know that it's frustrating. I know that it causes anxiety when you're driving, but resist that. Focus on what you're doing and keep yourself safe on the roadways. Carrie, wonder if the reason New York wants people to move into the intersection is because New York City driving is so crowded on the roads. Is that why, or the different reasons? Carrie, they want you to move into the intersection exactly for that reason. The fundamental conflict in traffic, right? Congestion versus crashes, okay? How fast can we move traffic, right? How much traffic can we move per hour over a section of roadway? How do we maximize the volume of traffic we can move through a section of roadway? On the other hand, congestion versus crashes. What is the cost of moving that amount of traffic, right? And in New York City and New York State, this is exactly what they're thinking. They're thinking that if you get a couple of cars through on the yellow light, that you're reducing congestion, when in fact you're not reducing congestion. You're actually contributing to congestion, because the advanced green, what happens is a couple of cars sneak through on the yellow on the red light, making the left-hand turn. Now they've held up the cross traffic, so you've delayed the cross traffic a half a second. So on one light you get it delayed by 0.2 of a second. The next one, it's 0.4 of a second, 0.6 of a second. The next thing you know, traffic is completely gridlocked at the intersection because it keeps delaying one lane of traffic on that conventional intersection as people are moving into the intersection and pushing through. You're not reducing congestion and not increasing traffic flow through that intersection by getting people to move into the intersection, but it's bureaucrats, right? Government personnel, people who are involved in transportation who don't have any background in driver safety, traffic safety. They're just one of the pieces of the puzzle, but they're the ones that make policy, but it's not the best policy, right? And there's probably isn't anything you can do to change that. In New York State, in the city of New York and the boroughs, they have don't block the box, right? You can't move into the intersection if you can't clear the intersection on the other side. So on one hand, New York City and New York State is saying, you know, you need to move into the intersection on a left-hand turn. But on the other hand, they're saying don't block the box to try and reduce congestion and gridlock within, you know, on the Isle of Manhattan, say, for example. So on the one hand, don't block the box. But on the other hand, we want you to move into the intersection on a left-hand turn to complete that turn and reduce congestion. The two are on opposing sides of the idea of what they're trying to achieve in terms of reducing congestion and improving traffic flow within New York City and New York State there. So we're talking about left-hand turns, keeping yourself safe. And of course, there's different kinds of left-hand turns. As we were talking about earlier with highway driving, Elevator said he's going to be going on the highway. Left-hand turns off a highway. Left-hand turns in residential areas, in suburb areas where there isn't that much traffic, low density traffic and those types of things. And then there are complex multi-lane intersections where you've got a couple of left turning lanes, advanced left turning lights, and there's a lot at multi-lane intersections that's going on because there's three things that you have to watch. You have to watch the oncoming traffic, you have to watch the traffic light, and you have to watch pedestrians on the cross street. So there is a lot of stuff, a lot of activity that you're looking at, you're gauging, you're determining safe gap and when you can proceed. And then of course, to make that all just a little bit more interesting and complex, as Marion said, as other people have said, there's social pressure, right? The pressure to hurry up and go and to make the turn without holding up other people when you're driving. Of course, we talk about the Jig-Jog, where you're sitting in the left turning lane and there's a left turning lane on the other side that's slightly not in line with the one that you're in, and there's a large vehicle in that turning lane on the other side of the intersection, and you need to move out to the left so you can see around that obstruction on the other side of the intersection to ensure that the way is clear. Because unless you know 100%, 110% that the way is clear and you can proceed, don't go, okay? Creep out until you can see, and then only then, when you know that the way is clear, then proceed. Left-hand turns, keeping yourself safe, passing a driver's test, learning how to do it. And when you are first starting out and you're making left-hand turns, make sure that you start in a residential area, low density traffic, someplace where you can focus on just doing the turn without focusing on all the other traffic, pedestrians, cyclists, motorcycle riders, those types of things, right? Don't go out to busy intersections and try and make left-hand turns. I've done that with students, unfortunately, when I first became a driving instructor and didn't realize how overwhelming this can be for new drivers, right? So know that it's going to take some time for learning and whatnot. And remember, pick the best answer, not necessarily the right answer. Have a great night. All the best. Bye now.